I'm Richard Miller, and I'm going to be moderating this panel. I want to introduce the panel. A lot of you all know these people, but this is Tiffany from Heartland. Then we have Aaron from Upward Management. We have Chrissy from Backyard Finance. Leasing, sorry. It's hard for me to remember because I used to work with Chrissy, and it was a different company name, same company, different name. And so it's hard I just want to say Backyard, I want to say Always Barn Rentals, because that's who she worked for when I was with her. And then we have Joe from JMAG. What I want you to know is these four people are in the trenches, doing the hard work, leading the teams, years and years of experience. They've been there, done that. Doesn't mean they know everything, but they have a wealth of information, a wealth of knowledge that they want to share with you today. And so we're going to jump in. I'm going to ask them some questions, and we're going to be talking about, the processes, the standard SOPs, standard operating procedures, whatever you want to call them, and how that ties into people. Because there's a lot of people out there, especially with my personality, when I hear processes, I hear SOPs, I feel tense, and yet they're so necessary, and they enable even people like me to flourish if they're in place. So we're going to jump right into questions. We're going to cover some purpose and vision. We're going to talk about how culture and people, how processes apply to culture and people. We're going to talk about consistency and growth, accountability and performance, and then also some long-term impact at the end. Also, I want to tell you right up front, there will probably be times I will be asking you for questions. If you have questions that you would really like this panel to answer as we go along, just raise your hand. Even if I'm not asking, feel free to say, hey, raise your hand, I'll call on you, we'll get you a mic, or no, we won't get the mic, I'll just repeat your question, and we want to hear from you what your questions are, because at the end of the day, at the end of this meeting, this breakout, we want you to walk out having the information and the inspiration that you need to go home and to build out your processes, to improve your processes, to understand how your processes help your people become better, your customers, but more importantly, your teams. So let's jump in. Why do processes matter beyond compliance or efficiency? Tiffany's going.
The processes matter because they reduce the confusion within the office, they reduce the miscommunication, the frustrations, and they develop accountability so that everybody's a team player.
I think it also sets the customer expectations. When they call in, no matter who they talk to, they're going to give them the same answer. And there's not, well, Joe said I could do this, but then Chrissy said I could do that. And then you've got all this confusion between coworkers, between the customer, and it becomes a real mess. So I think it goes a long way to set expectations for the customer as well.
Every company either has or should take the time to figure out what their core values are and to document them and to make sure that they align with where the company really is and document that and feed it out to the organization. So how do processes connect a company's values, their core values, to everyday actions? And I'd like to hear some stories, if you have stories about how a process connected to your core values, how that connection happened. Joe's going to go.
So processes connected to core values. What is a process, right? A process is a way we are going to determine how we're going to do something. Well, that something is the important part, right? That's the why. Why are we in business? Why are we doing what we're doing? And what are the rules we're going to govern by? So our vision, if you will, our mission, our core values, the processes tied into the core values is going to put our heart into achieving our mission and our vision. But it also is going to help us to navigate the objective versus the subjective, right? The objective is going to be your procedures, your processes. The subjective is those things that are heartfelt. You know, a customer calls in and they have cancer, so on and so forth. How do you navigate that, right? You want to throw the processes out the window and just give them the building, right? But you can't do that. But So having the core values tied in with your processes helps you to navigate those situations, but it also ties to the greater vision, to the why.
I think also in the rent-to-own world, there's so many different scenarios that you come across that, I mean, I think I've heard it all, and I've been in it 18 years, and I hear a new story all the time, a new situation that comes up. And I think it's hard to have a process over every single little thing. So you go back to your core values. When you don't know what to do, you go back to the core values and what those mean, and do that. And that's what I tell my people. As long as you're operating with our core values, that's all that matters. You know, we may create a process on that later, but just make sure that we're treating the customer right and we're doing what we're supposed to do with them, and showing them love and kindness.
So we have a thing in the office where after 12 payments, they're eligible for a deferral. And I don't know, I guess maybe it was 3 weeks ago, one of the girls came in my office and she said, I did a thing and I need you to tell me it's okay. I was like, okay, what'd you do? And she said, told me the customer's name, and she said they are, they're going through chemo, and there's medications that they have to have, and they're paying all this money, and they just really didn't have it for this month, and they've only been customer with us for 6 months, but they've paid every month on time, and their history looks good, so I went ahead and gave them a deferral. And I said, okay, why would you think I wouldn't allow that? She said, because they haven't paid for 12 months. And I said, but isn't it more important to make sure that that person knows that what they're going through matters to us? And while we do, you know, down the line, we're going to have a payment. For right now, we care more about what they're going through than we do collecting the money. And she said, yeah. And I said, so what you did was perfectly fine. So, yeah, that was, we get several calls like that, especially calls with, you know, mothers and fathers passing and cancer and all that kind of stuff. So we definitely try to remember the compassion and the grace, our core values, when we are talking to customers like that, because we don't want to be like Visa. We need your money. That's great. Sorry that happened. We need your money. Can you make your payment? How are you making that payment today? We don't want to be that way.
Even though we do need their money.
Although we do need their money eventually.
When we were rehearsing for this part, Joe mentioned heart, Erin mentioned dignity. She just mentioned a couple of new words, compassion and grace. I mentioned the word love, because when you have processes in place, you love your fellow employees that work with you. You help them develop love together, because it's not like a team of horses pulling two different directions. Well, she said that, well, he said this. And it also shows love for the customer. So by having well-communicated structure in place, it shows, for us at Heartland, it shows love in the whole barrel.
I love that. The next question is, how do you keep exceptions from destroying the processes? And there's always exceptions. If you're involved in rent-to-own, there's always these fringe cases. But let's actually think about so we're talking about, Erin, you just gave a great example about a deferral that one of your employees gave a customer, made the right decision because it aligned with your core values. What about when the fifth grandfather has died? If y'all in rent-to-own, you know exactly what I'm talking about. How do processes plus core values, like where do processes come in there in helping you navigate those? You know the customer's lying. By the way, one of my friends sent them flowers for that last one. Actually delivered them by hand. That was great. They were so embarrassed. It was awesome.
Don't know how to follow that one. The exceptions build the processes. So whenever you have, this is our general rule, and this, we love people and we want this, but we have a fifth grandfather that passes away, or we have something. What do you put in place at that point in time? So let the exceptions build the processes if the exceptions are repeated. So what we like to do is we discuss it. We make a plan, so it first starts with a conversation. Someone will go to their team lead and say, hey, we are having this happen over and over and over again. Can we put this in our processes? And then we let 3 days go by. If you let 3 days go by, you can figure out whether it needs to be part of your structured processes or if this was truly a one-off account.
Anybody else have something on that one? Joe?
So I would say a rule of thumb is, one, you have to decide the processes you're going to establish. You don't want to establish every little process. But number two, the greater the exceptions, the greater the need for depth and simplicity in that process. So if you keep running into exceptions, go back to the drawing board, dig deeper, right? You're going to have to build this thing out even better. And then similar to what she mentioned down there is, and this is, I'll say honestly, I don't do the best at this, we don't do the best at this, but a 3 strikes rule, right? You have the process and an exception pops up. Make good note of it. It pops up again. Okay, we need to start really paying attention. It pops up a 3rd time, adjust the process.
Can I speak to that just a little bit? I know I'm not on the panel, but years ago I took over a Facebook group with around 11,000 members. It was a very high drama. I didn't want to take it over. Somebody needed to step in. I volunteered. High drama, high maintenance, moderator, admins. They were investing over 120 hours a week combined in moderating this. Absolutely unnecessary. The list of the policies, the procedures, the rules is what they called it, was miles long. I'm exaggerating, of course, but it was just every detail was covered. And I took a completely different approach. I simplified everything, covered the concepts, and brought everything down. I think I have 5 rules, and I brought on an additional moderator. Between the 2 of us, we were spending less than 2 hours per week, and the drama was almost non-existent. I mean, it took a couple weeks about 3 weeks to weed all the drama out. And I think that's what Joe's talking about. If there's always, before you just add and add and add and add, if there's always exceptions, figure out why there's always, how can you make this procedure more encompassing that covers more exceptions maybe? Am I getting you right, Joe? Mm-hmm. All right. You go ahead, Chrissy.
Well, I think also it's documentation. I mean, my customers know, well, they don't know right away, but they know pretty quickly that I document everything. And so I document for 2 reasons. One, I want to know who they are. I want to know, their daughter got married. When they call in the next month, how was the wedding? That kind of relationship with them. That's a great reason to document. But then also to document because when they say that their grandfather has died for the 5th time, I clearly say to them, I've documented each time that your grandfather has passed away, and I'm really sorry, but we cannot use that as an excuse this time. We need your payment. And so I think, and that's processes, documenting. So I think that's the most important.
So there's some conversation here about documenting, and we're talking about processes or SOPs, standard operating procedures. Who in your companies, I'm not asking for the name specifically, but who owns that process? Who owns the process of documenting the processes, and what does that process? What does it actually look like to develop your process from the idea? Because everything here starts with an idea. Tiffany mentioned that earlier in the first breakout. Everything starts as an idea, and then it ends up as something that's written, that's distributed to everybody. Tiffany, you had some good thoughts on that. Do you mind starting it? But I'd like to hear from the rest of you. Who owns that, and how does it play out? How does it look?
Well, something that we have put into place in our office within the past year that has really helped in whenever you need to change a process is accountability. So the idea starts with a conversation with 2 people or 3 people, and that department decides, hey, we need to adjust this within our processing. And so we send it out to a notice. After we type it out, we send out a notice to everyone, the team leads, the managers, the ones that are heads of their department. Everyone has to write off on it. So once you write off on it, they have added a section over here for notes for that person who is signing off on it to put their notes on it. So say the call center makes a decision over here that we need to adjust a process. well, maybe they didn't take into consideration how it was going to affect the accounting department. Well, the accounting department can say, well, this will work, but let's take this into consideration. Well, when a but or if-then statement is put in there, then we go back, rewrite the statement, and then resend it out for signatures. Now, there are two ladies that are accountable for this, the one that's developing and sending in the order, and then the one that keeps up the tally marks, make sure everybody is signed off on it. Once everyone's signed off on it, then there's a follow-up email saying, hey, everybody's followed up on it. This is going into our standard procedures. And so that has really shown accountability within the office. And then each one of those people who have signed off on it is in control of communicating that to their department. So being very versed in communication is good whenever it comes to changes.
Like I said in the first breakout, I made some notes this time because I like
There
that
you go.
process.
Good job.
In my department, in my company, every department manager is responsible for their own department SOPs. So we'll sit down and, we see something that's happening, a rep will come to me and say, hey, I've had this happen a couple of times, it's not in the book, what do we do? So we'll sit down and we'll discuss what we need to do about it, how the procedure should go, bring it before the rest of the customer service department. Everybody kind of agrees on it. Yeah, that sounds good. Try it for a few weeks, make sure it holds water, make sure it's, it's going to go forward, and it is a good procedure. And then I type it up and stick it in our binder. So I like your procedure a lot better.
Good. Let's move on. In what ways can process, now we're talking more about the culture and the people and connecting this to the people. Because ultimately, if your procedures and your SOPs, if they leave your people behind, great, you got something great, but you've left your people behind. And that's going to cost you way more probably than not even having the procedures before. So you got to bring your people along. You got to empower them. You got to make their lives better. You got to help them do their jobs better, more confidently. And so in what ways can processes help employees feel empowered instead of restricted? First of all, don't hire crazy people like me, right?
I think for me, culture is consistency. Culture is when you can rely on your teammates and trust your teammates. So the policies and the procedures, if you follow those and they see you following those, and they know you're going to do it every time, that creates trust within your department. And so I think that's what culture is all about, is trusting others to do what they say they're going to do and to follow the policies. And so that helps when new people come in, they can quickly, adjust to the culture because you're doing what you say you're going to do and following your own processes.
Anyone else? Tiffany.
Whenever I think of empowering, I think of the lady that I look to a lot, and that's Dolly Parton. She empowers women. But more so than just Dolly Parton's mom taught us all a great example of empowerment. If you know the story of the coat of many colors, every time that mom stitched that coat of many colors, she was telling her daughter a story. So by involving her daughter into that coat of many colors, it empowered her. So we can do the same situation with our employees. Whenever we are making changes in a department or within a process, if we discuss it with them, make them part of every single stitch and make them important because they are in the trenches, then we have a coat of many colors that everybody knows why every stitch was put into that coat.
Joe, do you have anything on that? So I said about don't hire people like me, and that's actually not even true. But is the answer then, if you want to have these, is it to hire robots? Or we're talking about culture. Do you hire robots that can follow all these policies? Or what are you looking for when you hire? In thinking in terms of people first, procedures, SOPs.
We hire people based on how they'll fit into our culture. You can teach a process, you cannot teach culture. So when we are hiring people, we're talking to them about different things that we hold dear to us based on our culture. A lot of our questions are centered around our values, to see how they're going to answer those and what kind of person this is. Once they are hired, they've passed all the screening and they're hired, then we go in and we teach the processes. Because if they get the culture, they'll get those processes and they'll understand the why.
So is it fair to say that if you get the culture right, you get the processes right, personality becomes less of a factor?
Yes.
I love that. Joe, Chrissy, we good? Let's move on. How do processes help guide employees in using good judgment when every customer situation feels a little different? We've talked about that. Yeah, jump in, anybody. There's some really good notes here.
Well, whenever we reviewed this question, I always thought about someone who's making a cake. Is there anyone in here who bakes cakes or makes cakes? Lonnie, you make a cake? So if you run out of eggs to make your cakes, you can do a substitution. You can use applesauce or smashed banana to be able to bind the ingredients together. But your goal was to bake a cake. So as long as you know your process at the end is to bake a cake, or what your goal is at the end, your ingredients to get there at times can change. Not always. We want the steps to go that we always have cakes or eggs in the refrigerator. But if we don't, then our employee knows, okay, I can use my own personality and my own flair as long as I accomplish the goal, not necessarily the steps.
Anyone else? Good. Thank you for that. So let's talk about trust and consistency within the teams. How do processes contribute to that? And how does the lack of processes hurt that? Let's talk about trust and what that looks like and how the processes actually contribute to that.
I think trust in the processes is everybody being on the same page. Everybody knowing, okay, well, when we get this kind of call, this is what we need to do. We also have a lot of if this, then that statements in our SOPs. So I think that helps keep everybody on the same page, which builds that trust because we know everybody's going to give that same answer, and it's going to stay consistent.
What I tell my employees is basically, I mean, the processes are there, and yes, we need to use them, but more importantly, the core values of our company. There's going to be situations that come up. They're not going to know what to do, and I tell them just to go back to the core values, and as long as you've practiced that, I'm going to stand behind you 100%, because there's so many different scenarios.
Yeah, I would say they build trust in that their communication, right? So when Falcon spoke out there, a handful of people got a Dave Ramsey book. Well, Dave Ramsey just communicated with everybody through the written word, right? Through his book, right? So processes that are documented well, they foster communication, both in stated and what's unstated as well. But they also build trust, as in people are learning to trust themselves as they follow it, as they see the metrics tick in the right direction. But then the person that is implementing the process, that is upholding the process, they begin to build trust in the person that's performing it as well. So it's really good for building trust. It's really, really good for communication.
Why is consistency so critical in RTO, and how can processes ensure fairness without becoming rigid rules that harm relationships?
Well, for us, I think, starting out with the customers, just being consistent continuously. And then that shows them that, I'm not saying that we're not going to have some exceptions along the way, but if we're consistent from the very first month, then they know what to expect. And that's helped us a lot. We try to not make exceptions in the first year, if we can, just to establish. But of course, there's always situations that come up, but If we can be consistent with our customers and say the same things, that creates trust with our customers as well.
So let's get real here. There are customers out there who will play your teams against each other to gain what they want. And if you, let's talk about how processes help avoid that, because you know what? That not only is negative experience for the customer, they might think it's positive, but it's not. It's negative for the customer. It's negative for your team. And I've seen where teams of people can actually, because of he said, she said from customers, can actually start at each other. Let's talk about that a little bit. Tiffany, you shared some good thoughts about that.
It's those three statements that I do not like. He said, she said, or they said. If the customer comes at you and says, well, he said this, or she said that, or they said this, that means somebody does not know the process. And so then you have to go back to your ball of wax, and now you have built untrust in your company because there is not a documented process in place that keeps everybody singing off of the same sheet.
Yep, I like that. Joe, Aaron, go ahead.
I think it goes back to what Chrissy said. I can't remember if you said it earlier or in the first session, documentation. You've got to be able to go back to those notes and say, oh, okay, well, according to the notes that I have, it looks like Joe said that can't happen. Or, well, looking at my notes, a lot of times that sends them into a tailspin, and they'll start stuttering, and then you know it wasn't the process that failed, it wasn't the person that failed, they're trying to break you down, which happens a lot more than I would like to say happens. So yeah, just documentation and consistency.
Chrissy.
I had a situation the other day where a customer called in and wanted their payoff, and I gave it to them. They said, that is just bull crap. There's no way my payoff is that amount. You are wrong. Maria told me this, I go down into because we stamp every time we give a payoff what it is. I said, well, on July 4th or whatever date it was, this was your payoff, and now this is it. And literally silence. Okay, well, I'd just like to make a payment, please. So it helps to, if you have it written down in documentation, they're not going to argue with you. They're not going to. They're going to just go right past it. They want to see what they can get away with. Or I told you I was going to make a payment on this day. I have that happen a lot. I'll call them for payment on a certain day that Maria marked a date, and I'll call them and say, Maria's wrong. I said this date. Well, no, I can even go back and listen to the phone call. You said this date. Okay, well, I guess I'll make a payment. So it's just all about documentation, because then the customers can't get away with it. It builds trust between my team and I. We stand behind each other, and the customers know they can't get away with anything.
Joe, do you have anything on that?
No.
All right. How do processes, by the way, we talk about culture. Are you seeing the words culture and value keep coming up in the company values? And so you work really hard to build a culture oriented around your company values, and then maybe you have a fast growth spurt and you hire a bunch of new employees that you're screening to fit your company values. But so how do processes help protect culture as new people join and teams expand?
I think I said this at the first session. I used to be a very nice person, and I say used to be. Then I got into rent to own. And my heart got a little harder. So whenever you first start and you're a new employee, you are softer towards the ones who have had hardships in life. If they call you and say, I have cancer, or my grandfather died for the 5th time, you have more empathy, but you kind of lose that as you're lied to so many times. So having a process in place, whether you are a new employee and you have that soft, tender heart, or you are a very old employee and you have a hardened heart, you're both singing again off the same sheet. You're both telling the customers the same thing. You're both showing a bit of empathy, but you're meeting in the middle. You're not hardened and you're not too soft.
I love it. And the rest of you have anything to share? I'm going to go off script just a little bit. And I'm going to give you she was talking about, the difficult stuff and all that, and you get a hardened heart. I'm going to go off script just a little bit and give you a freebie that y'all at least think about implementing. Would y'all agree that a tremendous amount of your time and energy in a rent-to-own office is, besides collecting payments, right, that's just routine, is spent dealing with difficult situations? And a lot of those situations are difficult because people are not being honest with you. And if you are not careful, you will become that hardened heart. You'll become disillusioned with people. And that's not a good place to operate from. We should operate from love. And I'm not criticizing what you're saying, because I know you focus on that. But you become hardened like you should be. And here's a suggestion for you. You also, every one of you that's involved, you also hear the wins. You hear the stories about the people whose lives were leveraged up, whose lives are better because of your rent-to-own service, because of interacting with your team, whatever the case may be. Maybe it's the building, maybe it's the service, maybe it's your team, that their lives are better. Document those stories. By the way, y'all notice the theme, document, document, document. They keep saying that word. There's a reason. Pay attention. But document these great stories. Find a central place. Print them off and put them in a notebook or whatever. Share them with your team. If you have weekly meetings, read one of those stories. Like train your people to watch for these good stories and compile them. And whenever anybody in your team starts getting disillusioned, have them go read several pages in this book. It will shift our consciousness and help us remember that what we're doing is really valuable and changing lives for the good. And we can't let the problem change our perspective of that. That's off script, freebie, bonus, hopeful it's valuable. Chrissy, go.
Can I comment to that? I just lost my train of thought. So I know most of us are believers in here, and in the rent-to-own world, like he said, you get a lot of stuff every day. I mean, there's some days I go home, I'm just emotionally beat down from the stories. I'm an empath, so I carry a lot of it within me for people, and so I go home sometimes and just cry, and my husband's like, you can't take it to heart. I'm like, but I do. Sometimes I don't, but a lot of times I do. But it's funny how God is, because I can go through a day of just hell, I'm just going to say it, where story after story is just so sad. I'm just having the hardest time. And then the next morning, I come in and I have this customer that calls me that I feel God sent to me and tells me, you don't understand what you've done for us. Like, you don't understand what the rent-to-own program and what your company, what an impact you've made on our lives. I had a customer one time where his wife passed away, and he called me, and he was, first of all, he called me like the next day, and I told him, don't even worry about me right now. You call me in a few weeks when everything's over. And he called back, and he was in tears, crying, because he wasn't going to be able to afford his payment anymore. He said, I don't have her income. We did not have it, life insurance. They were young. And I said, well, I do have an option for you. We can rework your account. You're halfway into your account. That's going to lower your payments significantly. And he just could not believe it. So we did that. 36 months later, which I had not taught to him hardly in those 36 months, he would just make his payments. He called and asked specifically for me to make the last payment. And he was in tears. He was like, if it wouldn't have been for what you did, I would not have, I know they're not supposed to live in it, but it was their home. And he was just so appreciative and really felt like we had changed his life. My point to that is, it's hard being in the trenches, but there's always that good story, like you said, that can lift you up and bring you back to why you're doing what you're doing, why you're in the industry you're in. So let's dive in just a little bit deeper on how good procedures or SOPs help you move forward in a fair and equitable manner to your customer, and help your teams do that when you get beat down, when you are discouraged, how they help you transcend your emotions. Let's talk about that a little bit. Tiffany?
It gets you out of your emotions because you know your next step. You know what you're supposed to do next. So it gets you out of your emotions as long as you have processes in place. If you don't have processes in place, then you can get all tied up in it, and it can affect you emotionally, and it can make you depressed.
Good answer. Anybody else?
Maybe, excuse me, maybe I'm just repeating what she said, but ultimately grace has a line, right? And we deal with a lot of different things, and we want to come at it from a point of grace. The procedures, the processes, they give us that line. But not only that, they remove especially if they're practiced and run well, they remove the burden of trying to remember what to do here, so we can navigate that situation. Guardrails, if you will, right? We can navigate the situation because of the objective guardrails and stay right down the middle through the subjective mess, right? And ultimately, hopefully, we can get to a good situation before we have to draw the hard line. So,
Thank you. All right, next one. I like this one. How do clear processes help leaders focus on outcomes instead of micromanaging? And this is going to be really geared to people that lead teams. So how does having clear processes help you manage outcomes and focus on outcomes rather than micromanaging? Joe.
So clear processes allow us to know what the outcome is, right? So what gets measured gets managed, or what gets managed gets measured, however you want to say that. And so we have a clear process. We know what we need to measure. It then boils it down to, do we have a process situation that's bad, or do we have a person situation that's bad? It really objectifies that whole situation. Here's the path. Here's how it's going forward. You've been trained on it. It's not done. Well, you did everything that I said, so obviously the process is broke. Or it's not done. Oh, you didn't do step 1, step 2, step 3. Okay, we need to coach you on that. You don't have to micromanage if the process is very clear, it's very explained well, and it's understood. Then it just becomes, did they do it or did they not? Is the process broke, or is a situation with the person broke?
Anyone else? All right. I think we got time for one more, and I like this one. So if you're in rent-to-own very long at all, you're going to run across crises or extremely difficult situations. So why are processes critical to, I'm sorry, I jumped on the wrong question there. Oh, no, it's here, sorry. Why are processes critical to organizational resilience in times of crisis?
So a year ago when Hurricane Helene came through, it took out a large area where we have a ton of customers. We started getting calls. The shed washed down the river. We don't have anything anymore. The stories we heard were horrendous. So we put into place, when they called in, we set up an Excel sheet with who they were, where they lived, the company that they had rented from, because we managed several. And we just told them, look, don't make us your priority right now. Your priority is your family and your children, and your priority is not making this payment for the moment. We spent a couple of months deferring payments, just so that we could get them through what they were going through, which was probably absolutely the worst thing they'd ever been through in their lives. We went back to that Excel sheet a couple of times and made phone calls, not for collections, not because we needed to get paid, but to check on them and see how they were. They'd tell us a story about, they couldn't find somebody or a pet, and we would check on them and see, how that worked out. So several of them after the fact would call us and tell us, you helped us so much through that period of time. And, you didn't demand money from us like other people did. You were so nice to us, and we just thank you for that. And a lot of the things, a lot of them fortunately had LDW, so they didn't have to worry about anything going forward. But we still have processes in place working with those that didn't, to try to help them through, because we know it was so devastating. So it was really good to be able to have those processes come up with something so that we could get them through what was going on at that point in time.
Chrissy, did you want to share?
You want me to share my same story?
Yeah. All right.
Oh, my goodness. So Richard and I worked together for years, and we had a customer that we picked up. The building was completely full. It was horrendous. It was horrible. It was so messy, so disgusting. But anyway, we picked it up. It got on our lot. We got a call Richard got a call from the customer for like a 35-minute screaming at him that we picked up her building. And then she calls me, and what it boiled down to, the reason why she was so mad is because she had a pet tarantula in the building. And so once we got to the core of what really was wrong with her, we told her, we'll lock up the building. She said, can you please go open a window, do whatever you can, to let some air in. It was in the summer. So Richard and I went out there. We checked on the tarantula that evening, opened a window and locked the door, thought, okay, we're good. And she was coming the next day. Well, the next morning, Richard goes out. The tarantula is gone. Someone took it. There was no way. It had something on top of it.
The window was pushed all the way open.
The window someone had crawled in, which we had seen a couple of really strange people walking around. Anyway, we had to call her and tell her that her tarantula was gone. And she was really, really upset, screaming, crying, just devastated. Well, she ended up coming that day, and this woman was deep in addiction. It was very sad. But Richard and I went down there when she was getting her things. My point to this is that we showed her grace. We showed her kindness. She ended up calling back a few weeks later, or a few days later, and telling Richard, thank y'all for being so kind to me. I mean, we even hugged her when she left. I mean, this was a horrible repo situation, and we ended up making a friend. Even though her tarantula was stolen, it was crazy. So, I mean, in times of crisis, you can come out winning for sure.
To kind of sum up this part about the crisis, and I love this subject because it's about being prepared. One of the worst scenarios that I can think of is that you get a building back with a dead body in it, or you get a building back that somebody committed suicide in the hot Texas sun and decomposed up there for quite a bit of time, and you got to go pick up that building suddenly. That's worst case scenario from where I sit. And there are companies in this room who have experienced that. When you have your procedures in place, procedures that are based on your core values, none of that prepares you for that, but it sets you up with maximum opportunity for a successful outcome in an extremely horrible situation. Then play that backwards to the stuff that is more inconsequential, like the tarantula, and yeah, that's the whole thing. You see how it's empowering people? When your teammate member gets that phone call, and there's a body, they found a body in here, and they removed the body, and anyway, it gets nasty. And they have procedures. They know what the next step is. And so that's where it becomes really valuable in times of crisis. I think we're about out of time. We're actually completely out of time. These people here, these four, love to talk about this stuff. So respect their time, of course, but they would love, if you have questions, come up to them and ask them, at a break or whatever. Get their contact information. If you have specific questions, they would love to share that with you, their information, their knowledge, their wisdom. But weren't they great? They are absolutely great. Let's give them a hand. I'm going to turn it over to Timothy.
Thank you, Richard, Tiffany, Aaron, Chrissy, Joe. Great job. Fantastic. Thank you all for being here. Before we dismiss to lunch, we're going to have a prayer. When you go out of here, you can head back towards the main room. The food lines are there. Go ahead and get started. You can go back into your table that you were seated at inside to eat lunch. And then partway through lunch, there's going to be some more things going on stage, some announcements, and then finally, John Branyan will be up there as well. So let's ask the Lord to bless the food, and we'll go from there. Father, thank you for the opportunity to be here today and the amazing people that work together in this industry. Thank you that we have the grace to share with our customers, with our teams, with the people we work with. And we ask for your blessing on the rest of today and on the food as we go from here. Amen.